they give me two vectors that meet at a nodal point. Now, when you've got two vectors meeting at a nodal point, it's rather similar to this. Now, if this is in the right position, this can move in all the directions it's permissible to move in. So the joint surfaces depict whether a joint can move so far. So a joint is in free space. Now, being in free space, it should be able to go omnidirectional in any direction. Then I bind it with ligaments in a lemniscate. And so now it's got certain restrictions with the bone it's next to. So it can glide this far, but only that far. This one glides this far, only that far. So I've got a double gliding joint that's totally functioning. If it's now misaligned slightly, one of those joints won't glide through its normal orthostatic position. So I've lost what you call joint play. Now, if I've lost joint play, I've lost some degree of its flexion or some degree of its extension. There's a little bit of rotation, but basically it's flexion extension qualities I'm going to lose. So then at some point, I'm going to be straining my wrist or further up with aberrant signals because it's not working properly. So we need to be able to go to that and produce a nodal point with the thumb and a nodal point with the finger. And both of those are spreading. So now I've got all the rest of my fingers to be able to concentrate on the retinaculum. And you need to see hand anatomy, but you've got the 8 bones there, all gliding. So you're at the base of the thumb. So what I'm doing is, with a thumb and a finger, I'm taking these bones and I'm moving them and gliding them superiorly, inferiorly. Superiorly, inferiorly, working across the whole of the 8. And I'm looking for restrictions. So that one moves okay, that one moves okay, this one's restricted. I'm now looking for the restriction. I've got the restriction I want. Maybe it doesn't come up, doesn't go down. Now, in the old days, we would have made a manual adjustment to that particular bone, which you hoped when you made the manual thrust, that it would also repattern the ligaments. And in a high percentage of cases, I found that it didn't, which took me more towards ligamentous articular balancing than adjustment balancing and hoping it balanced the ligaments. So I spun it round the other way. And then I realized you don't need to manipulate at all, because when you've got the pressure inhibition on the retinaculum, which is this omnidirectional pull, you're inhibiting the gliding, the restriction to the gliding. So now when I take it through its normal flexion or its extension, what I'm saying to the nervous system is, I've took away the pull that's stopping you from gliding. I'm now letting you glide through the range of motion. The neural pathway is immediately restored. It only takes one go, and that's the beauty of the body self-corrective mechanism. I'm using that self-corrective mechanism to work it. I've now got gliding in the bone. They all move, don't need heavy adjustments, but I've balanced them via the ligament system, which is bringing it back to its tensegral joint that gives it its power and strength. So that's basically what we're doing on there. Now, as we come up again on this model, it's a nice model, but you can't see it because you've got the bones and the colour are the same. But the interosseous tissue is really important to the radius on the ulna. Now, what you've got with the radius on the ulna is a beautiful joint. But there's the humerus here, there's the radius, and there's the ulna. And the radius actually radiates around the ulna. And that's how we turn our hand from supination to pronation. So again, that's one of the qualities that I've got to look at in your joint. Can you supinate and pronate your hand? And you go, no, it hurts my elbow when I get to there, it hurts my wrist when I get to there. So that's, yeah, you're showing that. And again, can I just follow you, Paul, please? So if I was working on Paul, and there's various holds that we can do. So if he had hold of me in a feudal position, I can take his hand and rotate the radius around the ulna, and then send a projection down to the elbow and up to the coracoid process, and put a bit of leverage on, and that will tension couple all of his body into a defeat. So that's one of the, that's a gull wing. That's called a gull wing. And what you're doing is taking that there and then taking advantage of that locking. You're locking the carpal bones, sending the message through there, and you can see I'm doing it very, very gently because that's going to be painful. Then as we come up further up, you've got the elbow motions that if you take your hand to here, then you start to lock the shoulder up. So that's a movement that would lock the shoulder up. So you can see that some of these locks are also how the correction came about. So understanding that is this muscle here and where you've got the radius and the ulna rotating around. So there we are on the right arm. And what you've got is the various ligaments around here. I can name a few of them. Got my glasses on. Glasses. And again, the names aren't that important. In fact, I'm not even going to go to them. What you've got is bands of ligaments that come around the radius here, and it rotates that way. You've got a hinge joint that's also taking place, and you've got the olecranon process, which is the end of the radial bone. So the olecranon process at the end of the ulnar bone. So that's where you want to be putting your finger. So I'm attacking, or I'm not attacking. I'm coming to the elbow from this side. Now, when I'm looking at the elbow mechanism, I've got a hinge joint here, and right next to it, I've got a rotation joint here. So this one radiates around. This one's supposed to radiate around, and this interosseous tissue allows that, and this joint allows it, and these ligaments hold that in place. And on this side, I've got a hinge. So I've got a hinge and a rotation. So it's really quite a complex joint. And quite often, people fall on the ice, they slip, they turn something too much. And I damaged mine about 6 weeks ago. Somebody came to help me. He came to take away an old couch, and he come by himself with a van and said, I've come to take 2 couches away, and these 2 couches were 3-seaters and 2-seater leather couches. And I said, you'll never do it by yourself. And I had to help him. And this was about 2 weeks before Christmas. And I upended the couch and turned it, and we took it out the door and took it onto his van, and I wished I hadn't done it, but he was by himself. And I twisted this, and it took me about 4 weeks to get it right. This ligament went out. When it goes, I went to wash my face, and this one reached and this one didn't. When I tried to turn it, I couldn't take my hand behind there, and I realized it was a big problem until you clear it out. And a lot of people have those problems for a long time if you don't know how to clear them. So what you got to do is go to the arm itself, and you want to be working those ligaments. Now, this is the right arm, so I'm facing the right hand of the person. So I've got a finger to the medial portion of the elbow, and I've got a thumb to the lateral portion of that. And then the thumb of my right hand can now go into the joint space in between the 2 bones, the radius and the ulnar. And what I'm doing then is I'm squeezing all of those ligaments into inhibition, rather like the retinaculum on the elbow. So I'm squeezing them so that they're no longer pulling asymmetrically at rest. They've all got a pressure on, they've all got a signal, same signal. So it says, okay, so now I can free the joint off. So I want to take the joint into extension and flexion. I'll take the joint into extension and flexion, and I'll be able to rotate the arm inwards and outwards. And so I'm working the joint while I've got the inhibition on those ligaments. And that clears most of those kind of problems. Also coming down through there, you've got the nerves. That's the nerves. I don't know, a while ago. I've lost my arm. Okay. And so what you've got coming down the inside of the arm is the nerves here, and also coming through the elbow here, and on the lateral aspect of the arm, you've also got nerves here. So as you're opening this joint up, and so you like this, my fingers around the joint, I want to extend, flex, internally rotate, externally rotate. Then I can glide further up. So I'm coming to the back of the arm to check if there's any tension at the back of the triceps. I've got tension at the bicipital tendon. I can then come up with the coracoid process and start to inhibit further up as well. So is there anything else I want to tell you about that? Oh, the interosseous tissue, yes, is what we're working here, is the interosseous tissue that crisscrosses in between these 2 bones, that, as we know, are going into internal and external rotation. So I'm gliding up there because that's where your channels are running, that's where your nerves are running, down through those channels there. So they need to be opened up properly. Because again, little problems in there, the same as the perineus. If that's tense in there, it's going to cause a lot of problems in both the elbow, shoulder, and or the wrist. So as I'm working there, I've worked through the wrist bones, the carpal bones. I'm now working up the interosseous tissue, looking for anything that's still going to cause a problem. So as I get up towards the elbow, you start to look at large intestine 11, which is a big troubleshooter. But I'm also looking at the tension anywhere along that line to take it out, because I want that to work properly. I've now got the elbow working properly, so now I can put the elbow under my arm and I can go further up. And where I want to go further up is I want to be looking at the coracobrachialis tendon, the pectoralis minor tendon, the short head of the biceps tendon, all originating on that coracoid process. Because if they're pulling forwards, the scapulothoracic joint of the scapula is also being tilted forwards. And that again is going to cause massive problems to my shoulder, not being able to move properly. And yet the muscles might test okay. You've got to look for tensions in there that could cause those restrictions to be able to get down onto the clavicle and come to the sternoclavicular joint. Anything else there, Jill?
I'm just looking. I found the case study sheets. No,
Yeah.
No, you're just doing the ligaments.
So if I put Paul back on the couch, what we found earlier was a restriction to that joint. So we jump you back on, Paul? No, I'll finish that off as a protocol.
Yes.
This side's not going to be as visual, so I'll talk it through, maybe do it on the other side as well. But basically what we're looking at is, while we had the hand, I'm separating the thumb and the finger, I'm working on the carpal bones, and I'm taking them through their flexion and extension properties with inhibition on the retinaculum. So I've got a vector going into there, vector going into there. I start at the medial border, and I'm moving each bone up and down inside that retinaculum to see if they can freely move. If I get one that's restricted, I simply pull the finger and the thumb apart and point the vectors to that nodal point. Then take it, glide it through its flexion extension properties, its condyloid properties, and free it out. So you're going all the way through. I would then return to any opponent's pili test that may be tested weak. That should now be testing strong. I've got no scratch test, so I've got no nerve aberration. So now I'm working my way up the interosseous tissue, which is the forearm muscles, of course. And as you come up to the top, the forearm muscles have synovial sacs. So that's why we get tendinous synovitis, which is basically golfer's elbow and tennis elbow. So when we come to here, you've got those sacs. Now, as a masseur, we were taught to work that in a cross-pattern friction for up to about 20 minutes. And that's what I used to do years and years and years ago.